Tonight we're thinking about the big story, the grand epic saga of the Bible. We have already heard about the events of the first Christmas, but did you know that that's just part of the story? Imagine it's a beautiful, clear autumn night. The husband expresses his gratitude to his wife for her care and attention to his dad, but says it's obvious that his father doesn't have many days left. They all had come to that city years earlier because of the father, but now they were wondering together, what will we do when he's gone? They have a thriving business and a large team of workers, but they have no children. Finally, it's time for bed, but the husband says he wasn't very sleepy. Not wanting to keep his wife awake, he slips out of the tent by himself. And then he hears a voice. It's not an audible voice, but yet it was crystal clear. The voice tells him to pick up his family and his team of workers and go to a new place. No specifics as to where, just a general direction to head. The rest would come sometime later. The man asked why, and then the voice of God told him something remarkable. The Lord wanted this man to go to this new place so that he could become the founding father of a new nation, God's nation. The man wonders how this is possible since he's 75 years old and has no children. But the Lord tells him to look up. It was one of those remarkably clear nights, and the Lord tells the man that his descendants will be numerous as the stars in the sky. And not only would there be many descendants, but God also promises that they will become a great and powerful nation. A nation so prosperous and blessed that it will be a light to every nation and eventually bless every people group in the world. So he sets out as the Lord instructed him, and eventually he and his family stop in Canaan. And there, Abraham builds an altar to both thank God for leading him into this new chapter and also to express his trust that God's promise will really come to fruition. But many years go by, and still, Abraham and Sarah have no children of their own. Abraham begins to wonder if he really heard the voice of God or if it was just his own imagination. But finally, 25 years after he heard that voice on a cool autumn night, just after Abraham hit the big 100, their baby arrives. The 90-year-old Sarah delivers a healthy baby boy. They name him Isaac, which means laughter. This is not only because he brought such joy to their lives, but because they chuckled a bit when God told them that they would have a son in their old age. Turns out Isaac was their only child. So naturally, they were a bit overprotective. The term helicopter parent wasn't used back then, but I'm sure they hovered over him a lot, constantly warning him to be careful and stop climbing on those rocks and wipe the dung off your hands before you eat dinner. But then, when the boy was around 12, his dad heard God's voice again, and this time, he wished he hadn't. God tells him to offer Isaac as a sacrifice to him in the mountains of Moriah. But this was his only son, and Abraham loved him. Did God know what he was doing? But God had taken care of Abraham at every turn, so somehow he had to trust him again. They take the long journey up the mountain, and after building an altar, it comes time for the sacrifice. The man lays his son, his precious son, on the altar. He raises his blade, and just before it comes down, God calls out. He never wanted the man to take the life of his son, and in the nick of time, he provides a ram instead, so that at the appropriate offering of worship would be made. Isaac grew up and eventually married, and he had 2 sons of his very own. Twin sons, actually, Esau, the hairy one, and Jacob. Turns out Jacob is the one specifically appointed to carry out the promise. So in his adult years, God changes his name to Israel. And he was blessed with 12 sons. Can you imagine? And they become the 12 tribes of Israel. Hundreds of years later, the new nation is finally established, and the nation takes on the name of Abraham's grandson, Israel. When David assumes the throne, God promises that not only will he have a long and fruitful reign, but that in a sense, his reign will never end. That's because eventually one of David's descendants will ascend to the throne and be the king of God's people forever. And that descendant will not only fulfill God's promise to David, but he will also be the one to fulfill the promise God made to Abraham way back on that cold, crisp, star-filled autumn night. But until God sent that descendant of David, that new king, all the nation of Israel could do was wait.